everywhere. I mean, his son just recently was in a car accident and he survived it. It was a miracle. You know, and we're constantly being blessed. We are. I feel it. You know, when I was singing yesterday, I was choking up, and all I had to do was look at the tree, and I could feel the healing power from the trees. You know, so it's true. You know, we've got all the things we need to make these changes here that are needed before it's too late. So that's all I wanted to say.
I just got one more thing to add. Just to give you an example of what kind of a government that we're dealing with, what kind of people we're dealing with. A lot of you probably remember a couple of years back when Harper was doing this apology to our people about the residential school thing. I mean, I can see it, right? Even though I wasn't there, I can see it on TV. It wasn't coming from his heart. Anybody can read the script. At the same time, he was apologizing, shaking our hands on his left hand, going around a different program, the treaty program, I'll buy your land for $1. That's the kind of people that we're dealing with. Just keep in mind, who can we trust? You trust your heart. That's where it comes from. The person that talks from their heart. That's who you trust. Thank you.
I'd like to say what a wonderful evening it was last night, connecting with everybody here. There was a lot of love going on last night, great artists, great music, and I had a fantastic time. We got Heidi Osterman here. She's going to be talking about genetically modified foods. And as you can tell, as she walked around the grounds here with her megaphone, she's very passionate about it. And I've known Heidi for about 3 years now, and fighting the fight against GMOs and raising awareness. And she actually put together a rally in Kelowna where she actually paid out of her pocket to fly in Percy Smizer, who was the farmer that exposed Monsanto back in 1976, if I'm not mistaken, for who they were, and also David Suzuki. It's incredible the work that she has done and the commitment she's put into raising awareness here. Probably about $20,000 out of her pocket doing this. She's a certified nutritionist and is very credited on the topic of GMOs. Went down and studied with Jeffrey Smith, but I'll let her explain more about it. So here's Heidi Osterman.
Thank you. If someone would have told me a few years ago that I would stand in front of a microphone, I would tell them that they were sorely mistaken, because I'm actually rather shy and a poor public speaker, so bear with me. I saw a documentary called The Future of Food. Can you hear me? Turning it up? I saw a documentary called The Future of Food, and it changed my life. I had never actually been to a rally, except for one about supplements, and I wasn't part of the organization. But I saw this documentary called The Future of Food, and I was so shocked and so disturbed, I thought someone has to do something. And then I realized that I'm someone. So believing in the power of one and feeling responsible as a certified nutritionist, I took it upon myself to learn what I could do to change what's happening to our food supply under our nose. I don't know how many of you actually are aware about GMOs. How many consider yourselves very knowledgeable? Good. How many of you know diddly squat? Squats are good. Having reason to be here. Well, actually, 85% of people know nothing about genetically modified foods. And even when they think they know something about these foods, they actually are confusing it with a process called hybridization. Hybridization is when you take one tomato and breed it with a different variety of tomato and have new traits in a new tomato. But that's still in species. It's plant to plant. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say GMO, and GMO means genetically modified organism, It's also called GE, genetically engineered, or GM, genetically modified. It's the same thing, but it's a technology that's never existed before. And this technology allows scientists to hack into one life form, remove genetic data, and put it into an entirely different life form with something that would never naturally breed. A classic example is the fish and the tomato story, which many of you have heard about. They took the gene from the Arctic char and they put it into a tomato in hopes that the tomato could resist frost better. That was actually on the market, not labeled. They didn't tell anyone. It's no longer on the market, but that's a prime example. So it's nothing to do with traditional breeding methods. This is a new technology. It's taking genes and crossbreeding them across species barrier. You can't breed, a tree and a horse. You can now. You can't breed a sheep and an animal or a human. You can now. This is what genetic engineering is. Gene splicing is a completely revolutionary technology. So I just want to make that straight. So who started this nice process? Who, what, when, where, why? That's what I want to answer for you today. Who started it? Well, there's several companies, biotech, but the largest one is called Monsanto. You've all heard of Monsanto? Yeah. Monsanto is a corporation over 100 years old, and they have produced nothing but poisons and destructive agents in this time. They produced the atom bomb, Agent Orange, DDT, PCB, dioxin, aspartame, Roundup herbicide, and now genetically modified seeds. I don't think that's exactly an example of good stewardship for our food supply, do you? No, it isn't. And yet, most people don't even know that the food has been modified. It's not labeled here. In Europe, it's labeled. 50 countries in the world currently have labeling legislation in place. Meanwhile, our Canadian government has voted down labeling legislation on 2 occasions already. They do not want us to know what they're eating, what we're eating. I think that's very wrong. We will be having demonstrations about several GMO issues upcoming in the following month and a half. One will be on labeling, and one will be about the Arctic apple. Have you heard about the Arctic apple? Okay, the Arctic apple is a new variety of apple that's been genetically modified so that it will not brown. You can slice it, dice it, leave it in the sun, and it will not change color. In this way, the food industry can have a buffet full of old fruit, and you don't know it's old because it doesn't look old. School lunches can have sliced fruit that looks fresh but could be very old. Airplanes can serve old foods, institutions, old age homes, hospitals. So it's nothing to do for us. It's not to increase nutrition or cosmetic appeal. It's strictly to facilitate the needs of the big food industries. And that's always what's happening with GMOs. Anyway, going back to GMOs, they've been saying to us for some time the reason we need genetic engineering is to save the world. We need to feed these millions and billions of people. Well, we do need to feed these millions and billions of people, but I don't believe at this point that this is the method to do it. And this is the reason why. In 15 years of promising to save the world and feed the world, all they've created is 2 different traits that are genetically modified. One is a trait that the plants produce their own insecticides inside the plant. So for example, the corn, every single kernel is producing its own insecticide. You can't wash that off. You will be eating that along with the corn. The second trait is that it can be top sprayed with toxic herbicides like Roundup, glyphosate. Every green living thing would die, but not these genetically engineered plants. You can top spray, you can shower them with poison, and they will not turn brown whatsoever. So in this way, we're actually eating more and more pesticides and herbicides in and on our food supply. And as you know, pesticides and herbicides are already linked to Parkinson's disease and lymphoma cancers and many other reproductive problems. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So what is our government doing to protect us from this? They say it's safe. They say this food is no different, it's not substantially different than any other type of food. Well, if that's the case, then how come it's so substantially, so radically different that it can be patented for profit. What is it? Same, or radically different? I think the proof is in the patent. It's radically different. So what's happened is that Health Canada conducts no studies for safety on animals or humans whatsoever. They defer to the FDA, that's the Food and Drug Administration in the US, and the US doesn't do any testing either. So who is doing the testing for the safety of this brand new food? The testing is done in-house by the same companies that produce it. So for example, Monsanto does its own in-house studies for the safety of GMOs. Well, is that not kind of like letting Charles Manson conduct his own psychological review? There's a reason we don't let him do that. So therefore, we can't really trust their safety studies. So North American scientists say there have been no peer-reviewed scientific studies, so therefore they conclude it's safe. That may be true in North America, but there are plenty of tests elsewhere in the world that are really pointing at serious troubles coming our way. The British government, for example, in the 1990s, was trying to make a protocol that would become the protocol for all of Europe to accept GMOs. They did their own safety study. The government shelled out 1.6 million pounds, a lot of money in those days, and they hired one of the top researchers that they could find, and under him, 20 other prestigious scientists. So this team of 21 made the best testing protocol that's existed in the world to date. And they fed rats a GM plant, and they studied it over a period of time. And when they came to their conclusion, the scientist called Arpad Pushtai went to the British government, and he said, I wasn't planning to give you a quick answer or a quick recommendation to support the release of this food. But after seeing my own test results, I can tell you we cannot release this food at all to the public. And you know what the government told him? They said, we don't know why you're telling us this. It's been out on the market for 3 years already. So basically, they assumed it was safe, they put it on the market, and then they did the testing. They just thought that the biotech companies were not lying, that it would be safe, and surprise, surprise, it came out that it wasn't safe at all. The animals had precancerous lesions in their stomachs. They had massive organ damage to their livers, to their pancreas, to their spleens. They had reproductive problems, and there was just no end. Problems with their blood, problems with everything. So the British government basically shut down his studies. It took years for him to get his research back. He was finally peer-reviewed by 27 scientists, and that is the only peer-reviewed study today of an actual good study, and it's in the Lancet journal. So there are peer-reviewed studies, so they can't say it's not being studied. So why can't they label GMOs? Why can't they? Well, they say it's going to cost too much. It's going to cost manufacturers more money. You know, families are going to have to pay more, and therefore we don't want to increase the cost to families. Well, that's just nonsense. Manufacturers change their logos and their labels all the time. The costs don't go up. So that's just a red herring. Right now in California, we have the opportunity with a bill called Proposition 37. And if that goes through, these foods will be labeled in California. And if that happens, that will steamroll all across the US, and that will have an effect on Canada as well. Because currently you're eating crops like corn, canola, soy, sugar beet, and cottonseed, all which are GM and all which are unlabeled. These are largely in processed foods. So if you grab a box off the shelf and it says corn or soy, no matter where you bought it, 85 to 95% chance is that it's GMO. Does that sound fair? Do you remember when the government had the vote and said, hey, do you want your food genetically modified? I missed that vote, apparently. And yet, this is a technology that can never be reversed. So what's happening? Across the prairies, some farmers are planting organic, some farmers are planting conventional, and some farmers are planting GMO. the GMO seeds and pollen are drifting into the crops and fields of the other farmers. And when that happens, the farmers who aren't using GMO are sued for using this patent without a license. Can you imagine? They can't stop the wind. How fair is it that you're growing organic or conventional, something blows into your field, and the next thing you know, Monsanto's knocking on your door with a lawsuit saying, pony up 10 grand or 20 grand and sign this gag order, or else take us to court if you don't like it. Well, there was one brave farmer. His name is Schmeiser, Percy Schmeiser, and he said, well, okay, let's have a go, because it seems very unfair. He fought it all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that it does not matter how the genetically modified material lands in a farmer's field, whether it's by tractor, combine, pollen, footprint, you name it, purposely planted, cheaters, however it happens, that farmer is now liable. Does that sound fair to you? No, it's definitely not fair. So what's happening is our farmers are destroying our heritage seeds, seeds that have been cultivated for decades, seeds that are appropriate for our soil, that are already tested to be resilient. And because they're so afraid of having just a few genetically modified seeds mixed amongst them, they're burning their own, and they're turning to Monsanto and saying, I'll buy yours. So Monsanto is getting basically the lion's share of the market for seeds. They already own 90% of the seeds. And now they want every single farmer to plant GMO. Every single farmer. And the reason they want that is because these seeds, you must buy their seeds every year. It makes seed saving illegal. Farmers throughout history have always saved their seeds in every country. We as home farmers do that. So now seed saving will be illegal. You sign a contract. You must go to Monsanto to buy your seeds for the following year. And those seeds correspond with the chemicals that you also must buy from Monsanto. So really, it's more not about feeding the world, it's about owning the seed supply and the food supply of the world. Wouldn't you agree? Okay. So there are some farmers who are saying, well, it's worked for us. We're really happy with it. A lot of prairie farmers are really, having a good time when they make their bank deposits. And that's true short term, because short term, it did increase yields because they had less bugs. And yes, they didn't lose as many crops to different infestations. But here's the rub. Nature is smart. And now the weeds are modifying. They're resistant to Roundup. And the bugs are modifying. They're also resistant to Roundup. So the technology is failing and yields are going down. So what are the biotech companies saying now? Oh, we'll just add in more and more traits. So it won't be, the corn won't just make Roundup inside the cells. Now it'll make Agent Orange. And if that doesn't work, we'll just keep adding chemicals. At some point, it's no longer a plant anymore. It's a chemical factory, isn't it? So this is what's happening in the food supply currently. Many people are still saying it's what we need to feed the world, but that is not a case. A lot of the hunger in the world comes from lack of distribution, and the fact is that if these people can't feed themselves with free seeds, there's no way they're going to be able to afford genetically modified seeds and the chemicals that go with them. And India